Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm a senior UX designer at Retro Rabbit. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how lockdown has affected our working teams and how we do things, how we deliver projects to clients, and how working remotely has affected my own work and how we've coped as a team. So I think for me, the initial 3 weeks of lockdown here in South Africa gave a lot of companies the opportunity to kick into overdrive. They're working from home or remotely, like it or not, this is what's happening now. And I know for myself and probably for a lot of other people, we wanted to do a really good job in those 3 weeks so that in the future, if we could prove that we could deliver in a remote setting, that that option would still be available to us. And I think although for the most part we've done that really well, 100 days into lockdown or so, I think a lot of tech companies are still working from home, and I know we are. So here are a whole bunch of questions that about how things have gone and whether or not we've coped well. So is it better to work from home as opposed to at an office? Okay, well, this is a tricky one to answer because, like I said, the first 3 weeks everybody was mostly gang-ho, let's prove that we can do this. But it's kind of a mixed bag now. There are definitely pros and cons to working from home. So for example, some of the pros are you don't have to sit in traffic, which is, for me, saving me about 3 hours a day, which is great. And you also save a bunch of money on petrol. You can sleep in a little later, like you don't have to get up at 5 to be at the office at 8 if you work in some sort of scenario. There's also less people walking up to you and interrupting your train of thought, which is usually kind of normal in an office setting and not really a bad thing, but now you're responsible for your own thinking, and if you're interrupted, it's your own fault. And then I also have time to cook dinner every night, which I actually quite enjoy doing, so it gives me time to do that, whereas before I would get home too late and then nobody wants to eat at 10 o'clock at night. And then, you don't have to dress up every day. So I know some people on my team were like, well, their PJ pants where it was freezing cold, or just tracksuits and generally like comfy clothes. I kind of made a point of putting on proper clothes every day, but I didn't bother with makeup if people weren't going to see my face every day anyway. And then, the pro is the day is what you make of it, so you get as much done as you want to. Some of the cons are, there's no definitive break between home and work, which usually a drive to and from work would help you create. So you're saving time, but now you kind of, all the days blend into one. Feels like basically continuous work day, all day, every day, which is a little bit disheartening when you've been doing this for more than 100 days. It's just really not normal. I've spent a lot more money online on things I probably do need. I've also spent a lot of money on coffee and milk, which I swear I didn't drink as much coffee before lockdown. Then my sleeping patterns are all kinds of messed up, so that's not great because there's no you don't know what day it is, so you don't know, it's all just a bit of a jumble. So the other thing is that you're really not able to kind of recharge, I think, the way that you were before. So now that we're in day 4 billion of lockdown, you kind of, the mental fatigue catches up to you faster than if you were having a definitive break, to and from work, and today's Monday, today's Friday, when all the days are blending into one. It makes it a lot harder, I think, mentally for you to recharge. And then of course you can fall into really bad habits, and you never have humans to talk to. So as much as they're not interrupting you anymore, your train of thought, for me that's a big part of what's nice about working in an office. You get to see people, ask questions, get multiple points of view on a piece of work that you're working on, whereas now you're all by yourself, and it's hard to get a hold of people because you kind of have to make sure that they're on the platform that you're on, that they're not also in a client meeting who's trying to get a hold of them, but they're also not in another discussion with someone else. So it's a lot of work. So the next question was, how have I delivered projects to clients remotely? So it's really interesting. What happened was I was placed on a project just as lockdown started, and the client is based in the Western Cape, and we at Retro are based in Gauteng. And usually what would happen is we go down to where the client is and kind of get the lay of the land, get to know who they are, who our people are that we're going to be in connection with, who do we deal with, that kind of thing. And that really helps kind of iron out some of the hurdles that usually come with new clients and new projects. And of course, you get to interact with people and you get to figure out who they are and what they, like, are they the jerky kind or they're the super serious kind? And that was really missing this time around. You also kind of get to know your teammates. Whereas when you're working remotely, if you've never worked with these people before, you kind of have to find inventive ways to get to know them and figure out how they work and how you're going to work together. We obviously have a team of developers and a team of designers on this particular project. We opted to use Discord as our main place for communication with our own team, which has been good. And then the clients used Microsoft Teams, which is kind of common for corporates. So we kind of had to communicate to clients in one place and with ourselves in another place. Initially, we only posted text stand-ups, purely because there wasn't really much going on, and when there was, didn't really have much to do with devs, that kind of thing. So we just did text and everybody kind of kept track of that. From a design point of view, I made a connection with the guy on the client side who we would be dealing with. He would be our conduit into the greater building of the client and would tell us where to go, how the things would work, and if there were any serious questions about this system, that person would be our contact. And I think what went well with that, if you build a client relationship well, even if maybe you're really struggling as a team to figure out how they do things, if the communication lines are open, you can easily figure that out. One thing about working remotely with this particular client is obviously all the meetings happen on Teams, and because you've not met them, you've not been in a physical meeting, you kind of don't have, you don't know how is the meeting supposed to start. Like, does everybody have a fact chat before? Does people greet? Because you rock up on Teams and everybody's muted and you don't know if you're supposed to say hello or not. So it's kind of awkward the first couple of times. After a while, we kind of figured it out and got a little bit more comfortable. It was total at the beginning. It's difficult to figure out remotely, and it's really trial by error. There is no formula. There's no way to figure this out. The client's figuring out how to do this the same way we are trying to figure out how to do this. One of the challenges that did become clear from working remotely with clients and with team members you maybe never worked before is that communication was a big hurdle. So there were no physical interactions. We seldom spoke to each other. Reasons for stuff was getting lost. People didn't know what was becoming, like, what was this thing you signed? Why did you do this? Like, explain to us, like, oh, this isn't possible. Oh, we didn't know that. Like, it was just a lot of miscommunication. So what we decided to do is we instituted voice stand-ups. We would just get on a call in the morning, and even if you didn't have any work that day or we were waiting for sign-off on stuff so the devs could work, everybody could interact and hear what's coming, how it was working out, and if it was their work, they'd be like, okay, cool, so when we get here we can discuss in finer detail. So now that we kind of gelled a little better, having the stand-ups and actually physically talking to one another, not just texting each other, the other hurdle that became apparent was a disconnect between what design had created and what dev understood about it. And so what we instituted was a weekly dev review. So we would have the design team explain what they had created, why they created, how this made sense, and then the devs would give us feedback on, is this even possible in the client system? Or what are the hurdles? What are the things we don't know about as UX designers from a tech point of view that maybe we need to consider and update? And all of this would happen before we would have the client review. Often we'd be able to catch stuff before the client would even see it. Having added those formal processes, the stand-ups and the actual reviews, we also added in a dev review room in Discord. So if they had created something and wanted us to have a look at it, see if it was good, or if they just simply had questions that were not answered in the review, there was a formal way to kind of go about doing that. And all of these processes kind of helped us to gel and be more cohesive as a team. There was a lot less miscommunication. Obviously there was still some strain in places, but we improved as we went along. The next question was, how was the experience overall dealing with a client remotely? So for me, my initial point of view was that I felt like I was in the dark as to who I'm supposed to talk to. Usually if you're in a physical context, you can tell if somebody's open to a dumb question, and you always want to put your best foot forward. So it was a bit challenging, but we kind of muddled through. Once we had appointed the liaison I spoke about before, it was easier to establish similarities, understandings, baseline words even, just because not everybody understands words the same way. That was very helpful. I think that working remotely offers the challenge of having to figure out what people mean by their tone even. You don't get to see people's body language, so when you're giving feedback, you don't know if people are just saying, oh yeah, that's nice, but actually, they're not too happy with what they're seeing. It proves that you're going to have to ask a lot more questions and get a lot more feedback, especially if it's going to be purely via phone calls. So this client never ever switched on their cameras, which is super weird. Like, I don't even know what half of them look like. So you kind of have to put in a lot of effort to figure out your clients, and you have to really watch how you phrase things to make sure that you're not causing offense or miscommunicating something that they might understand in a different way. So next question is, how did we cope working remotely? And I guess the question is, personally or as a team? I think that we achieved our goal. The client's work is live. We impressed them, just generally. So in that sense, it was really good. Personally though, I think the first couple of weeks I was okay. You're kind of gang ho, let's do this, we can do this well. But as the days of lockdown and working remotely have gone on, I find that the mental fatigue kicks in a lot faster. Where usually I would only kind of need like a break in September, I took a break in June, and that was at the beginning of June, and already now it's mid-August and I feel like I need another one because working remotely really does require a lot more cognitive load. You have to think about things because you don't want to be bugging people all the time. You don't want to, have the wrong information. All of that kind of thing adds to the complexity of working remotely. And I think that although I would do it again, it definitely added to like the hard work. Personally, I obviously took some leave to try and cope. That did help. My patience was becoming much shorter, and I think my team appreciated me going on leave. And also, I try now to make sure that I end my day roughly around 5, start the day early, work through, finish the day. So there's kind of a definitive end, even though they still kind of all blend into one, but also so that I don't find myself in a place where I lack motivation or just generally don't feel like it. So what would I advise other seniors to do? Basically watch for when you think you need a timeout. Be honest with yourself. We are all under pressure to somehow this thinking happens where we're expected to do more and better than we were before. Kind of feels like we're expected to work longer hours as well. So we need to watch when we need a break and make sure that we put kind of not really like strict things in place, but things that we're going to be honest with ourselves to observe. What else would I suggest? Definitely communicate with your team. Sometimes devs tend to be the kind that don't talk a lot, don't really express themselves too much. Obviously that's a generalization, and designers tend to be the more talky, human-y people kind of guys. So you have to put a lot of effort in to make sure that you communicate well with your team, that you're finding out, what do you need, what can I help you with, rather than, okay, you have to come to me. Communication is key for having a cohesive team. I also would say make time to talk to your team about things that are not work related. So what I would do is in the morning when I did my design team check-in, we would just talk about how's the day going. It's kind of like this pretense of normal, like when you rock up at the office and you're busy making coffee and you're all gathering around the coffee machine. You kind of ask random questions about this apparently new show that I've never heard about on Netflix called Indian Matchmakers. And well, it can be a laugh. It's a bit of comic relief from like the seriousness of what's going on, but also kind of helps you to build relationships with the people on your team. So the last question is, would I work remotely in the future? I would say yes, as much as there are pros and cons. I think that I would probably split it to like a day or two a week, because I do like to be around other humans, but I also like the benefit of using your work from home days for like when you take your car to get serviced, or you got to take your dog to the vet. You know, like the days where it would just take a lot more time out of your day to travel to work, where you could be making up the hours you had to be somewhere else for even a dentist appointment. I also think that the flexibility is great. And, you know, if your company makes it clear that they trust you to do your work and achieve the productivity that you're supposed to, it kind of helps you to feel like you're not boxed into one option only. So those are my musings about working remotely in this really weird time that the whole world's going through. Thanks for listening to my rambles, and I hope that you've learned something. If you haven't learned something, at least I hope that you don't feel like you're the only one going through all this stuff in lockdown. So thanks for listening.